What is up, guys? Wolf Eat Dinner back today with a review of Borderlands 3. To say the very least, this has been a very bumpy ride in terms of my actual experience with the game, but this game has had some major highs for me and some extreme lows. I can't wait to go over my impressions of this game as we round out its second week on the market. I do want to give a heads up that before I start, there will be some minor spoilers, but I will stay away from character name, events, etc. if at all possible, unless the event lends direct credit to the actual review. So first things first, after waiting so long to play this bad boy, I want to come right out the gate and just say it. This game feels phenomenal to play. Borderlands is conceptualized as a looter shooter, and man do I have to say that the game nails it in both the looting and the shooting. The major thing I want to speak on to that point is the gameplay. Borderlands 2 came out 7 years ago and the pre-sequel dropped just 5 years ago, leaving most of us clamoring for more of this series. While the entire series has always had great mechanics, after a recent revisitation to former installments, they do feel a bit clunky and kind of like a product of their time. Number 3 stepped up this in a way that I feel is beyond just modernization or quality of life improvement. The two most simple yet game-changing mechanics I will point to are this: the slide and the mantle. Although both of these actions are very primitive on their own, they lend to the game a dynamic and frenetic way to continue pushing the game forward. These are two mechanics that fans of shooters likely often overlook, due mainly to their inclusion in most AAA titles. Borderlands has never needed them, and technically it still doesn't, but my god do they feel good. Other changes that are likely to be noticed by newcomers and returning Vault Hunters alike is the fact that all of the Vault Hunters here have action skills that truly make them feel unique. You can run the same class as someone and play the character completely different, and that's rewarding in its own right. Pair that with the fact that you can have multiple builds based on solo or co-op play with each character, and boom, you have even more depth. As always, you have a ton of guns to find, all with different variants, and it's honestly just as rewarding as it was before. So in this aspect, if you're a newcomer, welcome to the mayhem, and returning Vault Hunters, get ready to fall in love with guns all over again. I was initially worried that I would not be remembering the names of legendary items like I did in past games, but in my chair at the precipice of this review, I am very willing to say that I can recant many of the guns' names and the unique traits that made some of my favorites, as I could do with previous installments. Gunplay in this game should be renamed to Fun Play. End of story. Without all of the things that make this a Borderlands game, you would still have a super solid shooter, and that's worth saying, and it deserves its own merit. Something else is found just behind the surface of the game if you're a returning Vault Hunter. No more do you have to struggle with legendary loot drops, as they are very, very abundant. So much so that 2K has actually patched the rate at which you acquire legendary loot. Even with this patch, the amount of orange on your screen at times will be glorious. Now, while this is an extreme high point, I do have to state that it does worry me just a bit in terms of balance. There is still some grind to getting the guns you want, but with a loot pool of legendaries alone that feels so massive and the in-game content that I will talk more in depth about later in the review, the game loot at a rate that is somewhat alarming when thinking about the game's sustainability. For example, how many times am I going to see this same weapon? Or after a month of release, when are we going to get new legendaries? That being said, this is more of a minor concern, and we will have to follow the progression of the game and its post-launch content to truly see if there's anything to worry about. Did someone say planets? Because this game has them. At first, I didn't think the interplanetary travel was going to be all that, but here I am with roses in my hand ready to say I'm sorry. This game, compared to the others in the series, makes a conscious effort to set all of its backdrops apart in scenery, enemy type, and actual traversal as much as possible. It really is great to go from the perpetual desert of Pandora to the wide metropolitan areas of Promethea, then to the future city shrines of Athena. This is where the game really began to shine for me amidst the return of the beloved series. It is also where I began to start seeing glaring flaws in parts of the game that I so wish weren't there, but we will touch on that shortly. Vehicles have been amped up a little, and while I personally feel that they are the most lackluster thing to be improved upon, the devs did take our complaints about vehicles in the previous games seriously, and did fine-tune some of the things that I think we all disliked as a community. I'm still 100% of the mindset that the vehicle combat in this game is just okay. On the other side of this, the new customization options to your rides do invest you a little bit more in seeing to it that you are likely a contestant for Pandora's Most Pimped Ride. We also see that challenges have been added to give that just bit extra to do in each area. These challenges range from finding logs of the very first Vault Hunter, finding dead claptraps, liberating radio propaganda towers, the aforementioned Catch a Ride upgrades, Zero's assassination targets, and hammerlock hunts. These are quick enough and rewarding in their own right and don't feel like as much of an undertaking as a side mission, and moreover, feel like something that was put into the game to make you want to explore more of the unique environments, and it works to great effect, I might add. There's also a decent deal of emphasis on endgame and getting that specific loadout that you want in a couple of different forms. While this installment is completely lacking a raid boss so far, Circle of Slaughter has returned, as well as there are 6 Iridian proving grounds for you to test your mettle in and topple bosses for a chance at great loot. While in Pandora, don't forget that True Vault Hunter mode is back, but the star of the show is Mayhem. This is a mode much like Diablo's Torment difficulties that ensures you are getting the highest drop rate of legendary gear, but also makes the enemies a boatload stronger. This comes in the form of many modifiers. For example, enemies in this playthrough are all resistant to incendiary damage. Mayhem has 3 tiers, and for each bump up, more modifiers are placed on the game to force you to adapt. Lastly, for the positives, badass tokens did not return, but instead we get an overleveling system that is comparable to Destiny's Light levels or Diablo's Paragon leveling system. This will give you a point at the end of standard XP bar to sink into one random stat of your choosing. While this part is essentially like badass tokens, the true form factor that sets it apart is that along with your unique skill trees, unlocking multiples in a certain column will unlock new perks for all Vault Hunters, as this leveling system carries over for all characters once initially unlocked. As before, gains do diminish upon return as you sink points into the same skill, but there are still tons of reasons to continue playing and increasing your Guardian ranks for the content that is inevitably on its way. Now, as you guys may know, there are a lot of negative user reviews while the critics raved about this game. A lot of diehard fans are saying that these reviews are bombs because of Epic exclusivity, while some may be this is a game that has problems, and some of the negative reviews are more than warranted. Firstly, I do want to address the performance of the game. In the background, I'm showing a clip at 3 times the normal speed of myself falling through the floor after a major boss fight. There were several legendary items lost due to my lost loot inventory being full and having to reset the game after I landed and I couldn't die. When speaking on performance, I know I stated earlier that this is a visually appealing game, and I do stand by that, but this is only when the game is running correctly. As you've seen more than likely in this video, I have frame counters up at the top. I do max out well over 60 frames per second on ultra settings, but there are frequent dips below the 60 mark. And this is not something that is unique to myself. This is actually one of the most common complaints about the game, and I have a well-built PC. There are others out there with literal god-tier equipment that experience the very same issue, so this really is a very poorly optimized game at some times. Next, I feel obligated to mention that there are significant visual glitches in the game. 4 out of 5 times that I spawn, my head is missing in the third person, which just feels lazy. There are several problems like this that I don't believe are direct optimization problems, but are still annoying just the same. I've witnessed enemies in T-poses. This is very rare and brief, but another example of a visual glitch. The camera is generally competent, but there are times, especially in vehicles, where the camera does not cooperate, or in tight corners you will have a visual camera glitch. So on to the next point. I am not sure how to categorize this, but Vault Hunter balance in this game is very janky. Zane is the Vault Hunter I main, but he is not super useful. While he has good builds, he doesn't have anything that is 99% dependent on his currently equipped weapon. Then there are 2 very reasonable Vault Hunters, Mose and Amara. They are actually super accessible to play, have great skill trees, and can become powerhouses with time and effort. This leaves us with our last Vault Hunter, Flak. Flak is pretty much the standard for anyone who wants to dominate the game, but this is achievable only by unfortunate circumstances. Flak only has one build, so to speak, the high damage crit build. If you aren't running this build, then you aren't going to succeed, and that's disappointing in its own right. by my calculations, that's 2 truly balanced characters and 2 that are not balanced due to 2 very separate circumstances. Now we have to talk about the story, and if you want to skip some story spoilers, I will place the timestamp on the screen right now for you to skip the story section of this review. Last chance to avoid Borderlands 2 and 3 spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, remember in Borderlands 2 when you had to fight Bloodwing and you feel like you're going to be triumphant and then her head explodes? What about when Jack kills Roland? These both are emotionally effective and give you an enormous want to kill Jack and drive the plot forward. In this game, we see fan favorite Maya die at the hands of Troy and there is no emotion. Her death is literally for nothing. To beat everything, when you would expect the cast of characters to mourn one of their fallen, they instead gather and barely address the death, with only one character being truly upset and an ensuing eulogy provided by Patricia Tanis that is going for comedy in a way that completely destroys any emotional impact that might have been there for someone. Now, to avoid a major spoiler, I want to say that the end of this game sucks. There are 3 characters gathered that are all sirens, and there is a looming, Pandora-shattering disaster that kind of feels shoehorned in. Instead of the 3 characters combining their unique powers to stop this cataclysm, one character that they have written lazily since the second installment gets pissed on yet again. The writers must have realized that this character sucked, so what is the cheapest form of rectifying a poor character from a creative standpoint? You're absolutely right, self-sacrifice. Enjoy an unnecessary character death. There is an epilogue, but it wraps literally nothing up, and the whole game feels like a setup for the 4th installment, as there was a large plot point developed in the pre-sequel. This plot point was so big that it's almost a guarantee that it can't be shoved into DLC for this game, and likely it will be concluded in the next game altogether. So for everyone who skipped the spoilers, let me do a spoiler-free recap. This game has poor character interaction, poor narrative, outdated dialogue, and little to none of the lovable nature that made the other installments so great. I don't want to spend a whole paragraph on each of these points, so let's call them dishonorable mentions. Here they are. The music in the game feels exactly the same as the last 3 installments, and you can take that as you will, but there feels like zero variety in the music. Characters that you likely loved from other games are in the game little to none or missing altogether. Just touching on it, Epic Store exclusivity has divided some people from their normal gaming parties as others want to wait 6 months to buy it on Steam, which is a highly targeted market strategy seeing we've seen the release on Xbox, PS4, and Epic launch all on the same day. This really is just another highlight of how insecure Epic is. Now, these points were really just nitpicks, but I did have to throw them in there. Overall, this game was a really fun time, but there were often times when I willfully acknowledged that I was staying for the gameplay, not the characters or story. That is a big point I want to make and reassert. This game is fun, but the story is not great and the characters are treated poorly at times. Sometimes the game feels incomplete, while also feeling like there is going to be quite a bit of in-game content. To say the least, there are things that really don't mesh well together, but it still remains a loving contradiction. I'm going to go ahead and give Borderlands 3 a 7.5 out of 10. Now, if you stuck around for the full video, I just wanted to say thank you so much, and if you could drop a like and follow if you haven't already, that would be great. Share if you enjoyed it, and check out the video description for links to my Twitch where I play almost every weekend and we dive into new games as much as we can. Until next time, as always, much love guys.